Hello friends, for today's video I'm going to be going through a list of books that I'm hoping to get around to in January. If you saw my channel updates video, then you probably saw that I talked about how I'm going to have essentially a template of what to pick up within the first quarter of the year, and I'll likely tweak it a little bit throughout the rest of the year, but the idea is that there are certain slots to fill by certain kinds of books. So for example, I'll have some books that are going to be new releases within the 18 slots, and then I'll have some that are more patron picks. And then another thing that I want to make sure I incorporate, and that is true of this first one, are books that are going to be a part of the A Fantasy Fan Read series. And for this particular next one that I'm going to be doing, the one that won from all of your votes was Steampunk. And after asking all of you what books would you like me to try to check out, one of the top ones that got recommended, I believe both from my patrons and from all of you over on my community tab, was Soulless by, I believe the author's name is Gail Carriger. And just a heads up, my friend Jashana has been a fan of this author's works for years, so I'll have her channel linked. So if you are somebody who loves that series or loves that author, you will find somebody who is right there with you in her. But anyway, so I wanted to try to ensure that I at least got one of the A Fantasy Fan Reads books for January. If I can, I will likely pick up another one, but this is the one that is for sure going to fill the spot of something that was, I think, recommended by my patrons, as well as fitting for that series. That video series, I should be clear. I don't want to read all of the books for the A Fantasy Fan Reads Steampunk video all at the exact same time, just because while I think it can be fun to do sort of a marathon where you read nothing but a certain genre or subgenre, I am afraid that if I do that, then I'll only really be comparing the books to each other and not really allowing them to stand on their own. And also, if I really like one, then I don't want to then have to have a different one follow it up and then be bummed if it's not quite as much to my liking. So I'm going to kind of space them out over the course of these first few months within the year. But Soulless, that's the point. Soulless is the one that I'm going to be picking up first. After that, we have Blood Over Bright Haven. I might get around to this before January, but if not, then it will be picked up in the month of January. And Blood Over Bright Haven is one that I've had my eye on for quite a while. It was originally self-published. This is the same author as Sword of Kaigen, which I know myself and many of you really love. And so this one, though, it's not really exactly the same. I believe it's more dark academia feeling, and I have avoided seeing too much about it. It got picked up and thus was re-released within 2024 by a traditional publisher, and I was planning to pick it up and have it be talked about in a new fantasy releases at some point in 2024, but I just didn't get the chance to pick it up, and so I really want to make sure that I pick it up in January. This fulfills one of my leftovers slots, which is meaning books that I had on TBRs in 2024 that I do not want to have fall back. I really want to prioritize them. This one is up there. Since I was mentioning that book was previously self-published, we'll go ahead and segue to some self-pub fantasy that I want to get around to. There are 3 books that are sequels within self-pub series that I really want to ensure that I don't fall behind on these series. One of them would be Storm and Shield. I was hoping to pick this up sooner after the first book. The first book is the first in the series, Mages of the Wheel. My favorite of the A Fantasy Fan Reads fantasy romance video I did. This one was my favorite of that. I think it can be fun to have some of those tropes and trends be fulfilled within certain stories, but also, just like is the case in any story, sometimes you just get a little burned out, and I feel like this is part of what set this one apart. Plus, I just feel like the world building is so cool. The familial aspects were really, really well done. I liked the characters. I liked their chemistry with each other. I liked the politics. And each book, if I understand correctly, in the series follows different people, but it's building off of the story that has been established up until that point. So we are, I believe, going to be looking at a different couple within the second book, but the main plot that was starting to develop in the first book is going to kind of continue, and you're just bringing new people into the equation, because as I mentioned, the politics is great, and there are some threats that might be coming at some point that a character from the first book is trying to prepare for. So it's like we're getting more people in our party is the feel. The other two series, I am completely spacing on the series names. Songs of Chaos, I believe, is the name of the series for the book Ascendant. I've read the first two books in this series and I want to continue on. The third book is called Defiant. I also want to continue on with Rise of the Ranger is the first one. I want to pick up the third book in the series. I also really want to finish this series because there are quite a lot of books in it, and I don't want to have this be an ongoing series for a really long time. I want to actually ensure that I get through it, and I do find for myself, I think some of you are in the same boat, 2020 maybe popularized cozy fantasy, fantasy romance, and fantasy standalones. And even duologies, I would say, I'm starting to see a lot more of, which I'm not opposed to by any means, but I do feel like some of the more epic series that are books and books long, or even books that maybe the series themselves aren't that long, but the worlds are really big and the lore is really in depth, I don't feel we get that quite as often now. This is a series that I feel like really fulfills that for me, and I really am excited to continue on. Speaking of epic fantasy, this is actually an older one, and that would be Kushiel's Dart. I meant to pick this up in 2024 and I didn't get around to it. So this fulfills the leftover slot. It also fulfills a patron pick because I have a bunch of my patrons' favorites in a cup and I periodically will pull one from that cup. This one was one that I pulled and I've been meaning to pick up Kushiel's Dart for quite a while. So I was like, oh, perfect. And then I didn't get around to it. So I really want to ensure that I don't have this be one that consistently gets pushed back, especially given that it's somebody's favorite. I want to really be able to see what I think of it and give it a fair shot. And I think part of why I was hesitant to pick it up is that there were a lot of series I was trying to read through, and then I was preparing for Wind and Truth. Sorry. And I just know that Kushiel's Dart is a series that you really have to be paying attention because there's a lot of little details, and I believe there's a lot of characters and a lot of intrigue. And I feel to get the best experience out of a story like that, I have to make sure that I'm not in the middle of series where my mind is sort of kind of working through those and give it my absolute full attention. So that's part of the reason why I'd put it off to the side, and I don't want to continue doing that with this one, so I'm excited to finally get around to Kushiel's Dart. Another book that is the opposite, basically, of what I just described. It's extremely short, and I really don't know too much about it, but my friend Charles, who also has his own channel, he really, really likes this story, The Ballad of Black Tom. I don't know hardly anything about it, but I've been meaning to pick it up for quite a while. And given that a fair amount of the books on this list are more so epic fantasy and longer works, both in page count and likely the amount of time it's going to take for me to get through them, I thought it'd be nice to balance that out with something that was still following under the speculative umbrella, but was a little different in probably its tone and also its page count and world than those. I also, if I can, would like to get around to Wisteria, which is the third book in its given trilogy, the first book being Belladonna, the second book being Foxglove. And then I also might have a couple of other contemporary romance books that I might give a try, because while I know I keep bringing up the steampunk video I'm going to be doing, while I am going to be doing that, and that is the formal A Fantasy Fan Reads video that I'm going to be doing over the course of the first quarter, I might do a shortened version of that same idea, except for with contemporary romances. So if you have any of your recommendations, feel free to leave those in the comments. I do know that, I'm forgetting the author's name, but it's Just for the Summer, I think is the name of the book itself. It's another author, Abby Jimenez, I believe is her name. I know that that's a fairly popular contemporary romance author right now, and my friend who I mentioned at the beginning, Jashana, she picked up some of her books and really quite liked them, and so I am excited to give those a try, and I have some from Book of the Month, so I think I'm going to give one of those a try, and I'm kind of trying to prep. This will likely be an end of the January read, as I want to make sure if I want to coordinate it around the week of Valentine's Day, then I want to try and start reading them toward the end of January, and then that way I can actually offer the information in time for a video to go up around the week of Valentine's Day. We'll see, though. We'll see. It could be a nice way to sort of balance out some of the heavy fantasy works that I'm going to be reading, to just kind of pop in with a little fun, happy romance, contemporary romance, where maybe my brain isn't having to work so hard to know who's who, what's what's going on with this world and this magic system. It might be nice to just be like, oh yeah, people falling in love. But anyway, that's it for my January TBR. I am really, really excited to get started, not just with this year, but with a lot of these new series or continuous series. And I would love to know, do you have any goals for yourself for what you're trying to establish with your reading? Maybe it could be that you're trying to read a little less, that you have more time for other hobbies, or maybe you're really pushing yourself to get back into reading. But I'm very curious, since it is the very beginning of the year, what are your reading goals and what's on your January TBR? But thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.